Hi, everyone. Welcome to ID Radio, your go-to podcast for the latest research and essential papers on infectious diseases.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of complex sources and boil them down into essential knowledge just for you. Today, we're jumping into what is really an unseen crisis: chronic wounds. We're talking about wounds that just refuse to heal. And we're using a really powerful new review to understand how the microbial life inside that wound can dictate the entire outcome.
That's a fascinating topic because you're looking at a fundamental failure of biology. Wounds that don't progress through the normal healing stages, they represent this massive, often underestimated clinical and economic burden globally.
And when you say massive, you really do mean it. This isn't just a small-scale issue. The sources point out that in the U.S. alone, the cost of treating all wounds, acute and chronic, hits up to a staggering $96.8 billion annually.
Yeah.
That number by itself should tell you everything you need to know about the scale of this problem.
It really should. It reflects the incredibly high stakes involved every single time our protective skin barrier is breached. That breach, it instantly exposes all the underlying tissue, muscle, fat, even bone-to microbial contamination. And that risks delayed healing and, in the worst-case scenario, just devastating tissue loss.
And what makes it even harder is that the patient's own health can make things so much worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Comorbidities like diabetes, advanced age, various immunosuppressive conditions, they fundamentally change how the body responds to that microbial threat.
So our mission today is to move beyond that surface-level idea of just bacteria got in. We really need to understand the incredibly sophisticated mechanisms these microorganisms use to survive and, thrive in this environment, and how those specific tools are actively getting in the way of the host's ability to repair itself.
Right, and what's immediately fascinating is this paradox you start with. Pretty much all open wounds get colonized with microbes, but we don't treat every single one as infected.
Right, it's not an automatic thing.
Not at all. The impact is highly context-dependent, and that context is everything. Some studies even suggest that certain microorganisms might actually be beneficial. Maybe they trigger some pro-healing immune responses. It's a really delicate balance.
Okay, so let's unpack that balance. Let's look at how the situation escalates. Researchers use this six-stage wound infection continuum, they call it, to categorize the increasing microbial presence or bioburden. It's a spectrum, not just an on or off switch.
Absolutely. The first point is simple contamination.
Mm-hmm.
This just means microorganisms, whether from the skin around the wound, the environment, your gut, your mouth, have been introduced to the wound bed.
But the body can usually handle that, right? Just simple contamination.
Usually, yes.
Yeah.
The risk really ramps up when you move into colonization. Here, the microbes have started to proliferate, but just superficially. They haven't quite gathered the numbers or the specific virulence factors to provoke a big immune response.
It's a subtle difference then.
It is. And the third stage, local infection, is where the problem really starts to dig in. This has an early and a late stage. Early on, the microbes move deeper, and you might see subtle signs. A bit more pain, maybe an odor. By the late stage, the symptoms are overt. Clear inflammation, purulent discharge, and a definite delay in wound closure that you just can't explain otherwise.
And if that isn't managed, it can get much worse, fast.
Much worse. Stage 4 is spreading infection. The microbes have broken out of the original wound. They're moving into the surrounding muscle, tendon, or even bone.
And the final outcome is the worst-case scenario.
Yes, systemic infection. The microbes have entered the bloodstream or the lymphatic system, leading to sepsis and, life-threatening consequences.
That progression gives us the roadmap, but how do these microbes even set up shop in the first place? Does the order they arrive in even matter?
Well, it absolutely does. This is governed by something called priority effects. The sequence in which different microbial species arrive and start growing is crucial. For instance, the very first contaminants, which might not be virulent themselves, can actually prime the niche.
Prime the niche? That sounds like biological landscaping. What does that mean?
That's a great way to think of it. They alter the local environment chemically. Maybe they use up all the oxygen, which creates a perfect anaerobic niche for the next guys. Or they alter the pH. These changes then make it easier for the next wave of species, often the more pathogenic ones, to invade and survive. It's foundational.
So let's talk about some of those star players, starting with Staphylococcus aureus. This bug is, it's everywhere, famously on healthy skin. But once that barrier is broken, it becomes a major problem. What gives it the edge?
Aureus is just a master invader. Part of its success is down to these specialized surface proteins called MS grams. It's a mouthful, but think of them as molecular grappling hooks.
Okay, grappling hooks.
When the skin breaks, Things like fibronectin and collagen are exposed. S. aureus uses these MS crams to instantly latch onto those components. It allows for incredibly rapid adherence and invasion.
So adherence is step one. Step two must be dealing with the immune cells rushing in.
Precisely. It produces these potent tools for immune evasion, specifically pore-forming toxins, alpha toxin, and things like pantenvalentine leukocidin or PVL. They essentially blast holes in the membranes of host cells, especially the immune cells that are trying to clean up the infection.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. It's the shift between causing an acute aggressive infection and then setting up for a long-term siege. We know that regulators like AGRA and SARA are key for that initial, smash and grab attack.
Correct. But in chronic wounds, we often find S. aureus strains where that agra system is turned off. This lets a different stress response regulator called SIGB take over.
Wait, so if SIGB turns down those aggressive factors, wouldn't that be a good thing? Why does it lead to a chronic problem?
That's the critical paradox, isn't it? By downregulating those pro-inflammatory fireworks, SIGB lets the bacteria switch its entire strategy. It shifts toward persistence. It reduces its metabolic activity, often forming what we call small colony variants.
And these are harder to kill.
Much harder. They're metabolically quiet, they're less visible to the immune system, and they are incredibly effective at evading antibiotics. They treat immediate aggression for long-term survival.
So they go from a high-profile attack to an underground siege. And for patients with diabetes, all that extra sugar is just jet fuel for this process.
Exactly. In diabetic models, the high glucose environment makes S. aureus upregulate key virulence factors. And this enhanced virulence depends entirely on the bacteria having specific glucose transporters, which lets them just soak up all that excess sugar.
Let's move to our second powerhouse then, Pseudomonas aeruginosa. This is the one that's notorious for that blue-green pus and its incredible biofilm fortress.
Biofilms are, without a doubt, a major virulence factor. They're these multicellular aggregates embedded in a self-made slime layer. And this structure physically protects the bacteria. It's a huge reason for their high antibiotic resistance.
But the review we looked at points out that it's not always about the biofilm, is it?
That's a key nuance, yes. For some clinical isolates, survival was less about building a thick biofilm and more about the capacity for just sustained, high-density growth in those stressful, low-oxygen conditions you find deep in a chronic wound. It also relies heavily on toxins delivered by its type 3 secretion system. Think of it like a molecular syringe.
So it's injecting poisons directly into host cells.
Directly. And whether they're in a fortress or just growing in a dense city, they need specific food sources. Studies have shown that long-chain fatty acids are the main carbon source for P. aeruginosa in wounds, and the availability of arginine, another nutrient, heavily influences its motility and virulence.
Which could be a new therapeutic angle. Starve them out.
Potentially, yes.
We can't just focus on the A-listers, though. The overlooked microbes are just as important, particularly the anaerobes. They thrive in low-oxygen environments, which is common in, say, a deep diabetic wound.
The obligate anaerobes are crucial. Vinigoldia magna, for instance, its main weapon is the SUFA protease, which cleaves fibrinogen. Fibrinogen is essential for clotting, so this actively delays healing. And then you have Bacteroides fragilis, which is known for just an impressive arsenal of antibiotic resistance mechanisms.
And what about the non-bacterial players? Fungi, viruses.
Fungi like Candida albicans are common. They're highly adaptable. They can switch from a benign yeast form to a highly invasive hyphal form that can penetrate tissue. We also see allergic fungi like Cladosporium and Aspergillus in diabetic wounds, which suggests a really complex interplay between infection and host hypersensitivity.
And viruses. I mean, we usually hear about bacteriophages as a potential therapy.
We do, but they have this dual nature. While we're studying them to kill bacteria, they can also make infections worse. The PF bacteriophage, for instance, is produced by P. aeruginosa itself, and it actually promotes and stabilizes that protective biofilm.
So the bacteria is weaponizing a virus to build a better defense for itself.
Exactly. It's incredible. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the reality is that chronic wounds are almost never colonized by just one species. It's the complexity of these polymicrobial interactions, how all these bacteria, fungi, and viruses interact, that really determines if a wound heals.
And these interactions aren't always friendly, right? They can be super competitive.
That's right. You see competition where, for example, P. aeruginosa lyses S. aureus just to steal iron. You also see interference where one microbe harms another, like Enterococcus faecalis lowering the pH to inhibit P. aeruginosa. Fascinatingly, some P. aeruginosa products can even make S. aureus more susceptible to certain antibiotics.
But the synergy, when they work together, that seems like the most dangerous part for the host. Can you give us some specific examples of that cooperation?
Oh, absolutely. P. aeruginosa can enhance the production of an S. aureus virulence factor called staphyloxanthin. In an even more complex example, the fungus Candida albicans can provide a physical scaffold for bacteria to attach to. This increases the antibiotic tolerance of its partners, like S. aureus. The whole community becomes stronger together.
This community focus brings us right back to the role of the host. We've said how comorbidities, diabetes, obesity, they fundamentally derail the healing process. The host is not a passive environment.
Not at all. And we're now learning that host genetics play a surprising role. Studies have found that genetic variation in genes like TLN2 and ZNF521 is linked to both the total amount of bacteria in a wound and the specific abundance of pathogens like P. aeruginosa.
That's a huge takeaway. So you're saying your genetics can literally influence which specific microbes thrive in your wounds.
That's exactly it. Your individual genetic profile influences the environmental conditions within the wound. Maybe immune signaling, maybe nutrient flow, and that directly selects the composition of the microbial community. It changes how we have to think about risk. So given this level of complexity and adaptation, this raises an important question. If the microbes are so good at working together, how do we even begin to effectively treat these infections?
Well, the threat of antimicrobial resistance is huge here. Chronic wounds are perfect breeding grounds for resistant strains like MRSA and multidrug resistant P. aeruginosa.
The data is alarming. Whole metagenomic sequencing reveals that over 50% of diabetic foot ulcer specimens contain resistance genes to multiple classes of antibiotics simultaneously. We're talking aminoglycosides, macrolides, beta-lactams. Resistance is really the rule, not the exception.
Which is why the cornerstone of care is still aggressive debridement, physically removing that dead tissue and the biofilm. You have sharp debridement, enzymatic gels, and, well, the last resort use of maggot therapy, where living larvae are used to clean the wound.
But we are seeing novel therapies emerge, which is promising. Nanotechnology, for instance, silver nanoparticles or antimicrobial peptides that are incorporated directly into dressings for a sustained, targeted release.
And it's funny how old remedies are coming back, too. Manuka honey-based dressings have proven bactericidal properties and can reduce biofilm.
And of course, phage therapy, using viruses to kill bacteria, is being actively studied, though clinical efficacy is still a big hurdle. Most critically, I think, are the microbiota-based approaches, leveraging the fact that some commensals, like Alcaligenes faecalis, actively promote the growth of new skin tissue. That moves us toward balancing the microbiome instead of just trying to sterilize it.
This deep dive really underscores that core idea, doesn't it? Wound healing is this multifactorial process where the microbiome, the host, and all those microbial interactions are just deeply interwoven. We have to move past simply targeting the single most obvious pathogen.
Absolutely. The traditional approach has been about pure eradication, wiping the slate clean. But we know some commensal skin microbes can actually enhance epithelialization and support tissue repair. So if we can precisely identify and leverage those beneficial microbes, if we can shift our focus from killing everything to actively nurturing a wound's helpful microbial community, could future wound care finally overcome this massive challenge? That's really something we're thinking about.
Thanks for watching. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to ID Radio.